I pay homage to the Gautama, who, moved by his compassion toward the sublime Dharma, to rid us of all distorted views. So I recite this verse every day. Master Nagarjuna, after writing his Mula Madhyamaka Kareka, at the end of the 27th chapter, he wrote this verse of remembering the kindness of the Guru, Buddha. So as soon as I wake up, I recite this verse every morning. So it is said in the sutra, so rising or coming of the Buddhas in the world is the source of happiness, and the Sangha, being in harmony, also is the source of happiness. So the Buddha, having come to India 2,600 years ago, turned the three wheels of Dharma, as I mentioned yesterday. So the Nirmana, the supreme Nirmanakaya form of the Buddha, of course, passed away, but his words, still exist. And his followers, Nagarjuna and his other masters, commented on the teaching of Buddha in general, and particularly the Prajnaparamita Sutras. So we can actually see these texts written by them even today. And they're not just meant for reading some occasionally, but they're not just left at that. But what we have done in Tibet is memorize the root text and then studied word by word these texts, as well as we rigorously study these texts by using logic and reasoning that are established by the Dignaga and Dharmakirti, and therefore the teaching of the Buddha, the Buddha gave his teaching and is the source of happiness in the world. And in the past, we have actually separated ourselves to saying, oh, we are followers of the Pali tradition and Sanskrit tradition and so forth, and lived in our own places without interacting with each other. But we have come in contact with each other in recent times. And therefore, in the last many years, the people from different Asian countries have been able to gather here in this place, and there's growing number of people, growing interest from people in the teaching of the Buddha. Buddhism has been our traditional spiritual religion, and we are able to share it with each other as the followers of the same teacher, and it is very important for us to feel closer to one another because of that. So sometimes I think that as a Buddhist monk, I have more contact with the Christian monks and practitioners, and also with Muslim practitioners. And compared to that, I have less contact with our Buddhist brothers and sisters. But the contact is increasing, and it's something that we just appreciate and rejoice. And the harmony amongst the Sangha is the source of happiness. So sharing the knowledge of Buddhism that we have as our own traditions is good, and the purpose of that is to practice. And here, the austerity does not just mean depending on very poor living conditions, but not letting our minds go astray and get distracted, but be mindful and vigilant and do our practice. And it is said by the Arahat Sagadeva, make this life of a monk meaningful, a monastic meaningful, by doing meditation and study of the scriptures. So, meditation, which comprise both analytical and focusing meditation. So we need to combine these two aspects of meditation. And then with regard to the object that we meditate on, the Buddha taught the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths during the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma, and then also he laid down the Vinaya rules, and there are the 4 agamas of the Vinaya, and therefore the monastics should read these and also apply them in practice. And with regard to the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, of course we do recite the Heart Sutra, regarding which it is one of the 7, or what is known as the 17 mother and son scriptures of this Perfection of Wisdom. And we should study this, and not only do study and reflection, meditation on these texts in order to become intellectually, gain intellectual scholarship alone, to become professors so that you could actually show off your knowledge to others, but we need to actually use this knowledge to discipline our mind, and therefore we need to engage in giving up distraction and focus on concentration, meditative concentration. And therefore Master Vasubandhu has said this verse in Abhidhamma Kosha Karika. The teaching of the Buddha is twofold, scriptural and realization. And so the scriptures must be studied and taught to others, and then realization must be gained through practice, and so preserved through practice. And therefore the twofold doctrine of the Buddha, scriptural and realization, must be preserved through study and practice. So of course we may do certain practices, but the most important thing, according to Master Vasubandhu, to preserve the Dharma is only by study and practice that we could preserve the teaching of the Buddha. So the only is a term which actually excludes other means by which we could preserve the teaching of the Buddha. So whether it's a Pali tradition or the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, we have all the teachings come down to the 3 baskets, the 3 Pitaka, which the content of the subject matter of which are the 3 trainings. The training of morality, emphasizing the scriptures which emphasize this, is the Vinaya, the Pitaka, and then those scriptures which emphasize concentration are the Sutra scripture, and then the Sutra Pitaka, and then the wisdom is emphasized in the Abhidhamma Pitaka. And so these are the 3 baskets which we should study, and the purpose of which is to practice the three trainings. And then with regard to the sequence of three trainings, morality comes first, followed by concentration, and then vipassana, or wisdom. So, of course, the means, the agent which uproots our negative emotions is wisdom, within which there are the wisdom of the conventional understanding is conventional objects or subjects, and then the wisdom realizing ultimate reality. And so that's the later wisdom is an antidote to our negative emotions. And so the negative emotions are overcome with this wisdom. And so for that, we need to develop single-pointed concentration, which comes as a result of mindfulness and introspection. And when you practice morality, you also practice conscientiousness. And therefore, by studying the three Tripitaka, we need to practice the three trainings. And therefore, through these two, study and practice, we need to preserve the teaching of the Buddha, and therefore being harmonious among the Sangha, and we could also engage in this kind of ascetic or austerity practice. Namda Shingla Jeba Bu. So blessing for the tea and bread, please. 계시고 Radio geliyor.
Passing.
So whatever you have studied, you should apply them in practice, thereby disciplining your mind completely and be able to develop the antidote to our negative emotions, from which all the negative actions of body, speech, mind ensue. And when you overcome all negative emotions, you are said to have reached arahatship. And then when you go further, you reach Buddhahood as well. And so the teaching of the Four Noble Truths the Buddha has taught is meant for that goal, attaining that goal. And therefore we need to understand what suffering is. And so we understand the cessation, what true cessation means. And so when we are introduced to this true cessation, then in order to reach that, we actually grew enthusiasm to practice the three trainings without any fear. So Buddhism, the teaching of the Buddha should not be practiced on the basis of fear, but enthusiasm. So the introduction to suffering and its origin are to actually lead us to understand what the true cessation is, or liberation is. Because we do not want suffering but happiness, yet as long as there is afflictive emotions within us, we are bound to suffer, subject to suffering. And therefore, when you understand that understanding and the penetrative understanding of emptiness leads us to that goal of cessation and liberation, and then you feel quite inspired to engage in the path. So I'll tell you a story for those who have come from the Pali tradition and other Buddhist countries. In Tibet, we have many monasteries, and monks, lamas and abbots are actually, people revere them. Respect them. And so one devotee came to a monastery to meet the abbot, and the abbot was absent from the monastery. And so the visitor said, "I want to meet the abbot," and somebody told him in the monastery that the abbot is not there. And so the visitor said, "Where did the abbot go?" And the answer was, he went to scare the villagers. So Buddhism is actually meant for introducing the liberation. And in order to understand what liberation is, we need to make people understand how to reach there and so forth. And Buddhism is not to actually frighten people by saying you're going to hell if you do not do such and such, or if you do certain negative things and so forth. So of course, I respect all the religious traditions of the world, and I've actually have a sense of wonder regarding all these religious traditions. I'm amazed at how beneficial these religions have been in the world. But many of them seem to actually use the tactic of scare tactic by saying if you don't follow the will of God, you'll go to hell. But Buddhism, the goal or the target is liberation, and in order to reach there, we have the practice of the three trainings, and therefore we need to also engage in the study to educate ourselves about the three pitaka. in Tibetan Library, the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives here in Dharamsala, one Indian used to attend the classes there. And so one day he came to see me and told me that he was going to he went to the classes in the Tibetan Library, and when he heard about the teachings on cherishing others and how to overcome self-cherishing attitude, the faults of self-cherishing attitude and so forth, he was quite inspired. But then another day he attended the class and he actually heard about this hot and cold hell realms, and the hot ones are so hot that he felt that they were unbearable, and as well as the cold ones. And so he left. He actually stopped going to the class. So we need to first make people understand how the things on the ground level are, the reality, the basis. Of course, it is found in the Pali tradition, but mainly there's great details in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And Master Nagarjuna says that the Buddhas give teachings on the basis of the two truths, which are the conventional and the ultimate. And so the Buddha gave teachings on the basis of the two truths. And so the commentaries or explanations of the Prajnaparamita, perfect and wisdom teachings, such as Abhidha Samaya Alankara by Maitreya, goes through the topics which are called instructions. And so he goes through this in the verse. It says Druptang Dembanamta, which means the practice and then the truths. And so the first practice refers to the two truths, and then on the basis of which you lead disciples to understand the four truths, the noble truths. And so introduce the true Dharma, we need to actually make people understand what the true cessation and true path are. And so without which we will not know the true Dharma. And so in order to understand this, the cessation and the true path and true cessation, you need to actually make people understand that of dependent origination, not just the selflessness, and on the basis of understanding dependent origination. Of course, in terms of dependent origination, there are degrees of subtlety, the coarse ones as well as, and then leading them into this deeper aspect of dependent origination. So, of course, in other traditions like Christianity and so forth, they talk about everything being having been created by God. So they use their own reasoning. And then in non-Buddhist, Indian classical and non-Buddhist tradition, there are certain schools which talk about primal factor as being the source of everything. So for Buddhists, we need to introduce people to the understanding of dependent origination. The subtle aspect of which is that everything is merely designated, that they are imputed by name and conventions. And Master Nagarjuna says in his Mulammadhyamaka Karika, what is dependent originated is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. And also, as I explained yesterday, to understand this, the deeper meaning of it, I explained about form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and so forth. And so, on the basis of the understanding the two truths, you are led into the understanding of the four truths, noble truths. And through that, lead you to understand the liberation. And so the first Buddhist councils where is well known, where the Tripitakas were compiled, whereas the Prajnaparamita Sutras, regarding them, there is no Buddhist council held to in the popular sense, whereas it is said in Tarka Jivala by Bhavaviveka, Master Bhavaviveka, that they were compiled by bodhisattva deities like Manjushri and so forth. But if you actually read them closely, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, to understand the Four Noble Truths precisely and thoroughly, it is indispensable to understand the two truths. It has to come on the basis of these two truths. And so after the passing away of the Buddha, with regard to the monastic institutions, the first major monastic institution, Buddhist institution, was Takshashila. And then later, the Nalanda tradition, Nalanda monastic institution developed. Maybe it was one of the greatest monastic institutions of India in ancient times. And so there have been many great masters of this institution. So masters like Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and so forth came from this Nalanda monastic institution. This one is just inquiring about the birthplace of Chandrakirti, which is called in the text Samandabhadra. So where it is. So the monastic Nalanda institution was a great academic institution from which has actually been produced many great masters. And one of them was Master Chandarakshita, one of the top scholars, who was a Madhyamaka philosopher and the proponent of the Madhyamaka philosophy, and also a logician. And he, so we don't need to look at any historical account saying he was a logician, but if you look at his own writing, you will know that he was a logician, because he has written Tattva Samgraha, the a compendium of reality, and then his disciple Kamalashila wrote the Tattva Samgraha Panjika, the explanation of the difficult points of the Tattva Samgraha. And Master Chandarakshita also wrote his text, The Ornament of the Middle Way, as well. So he followed the philosophical tradition where true existence is rejected. While doing that, he also accepted the Chittamatra philosophical assertion of rejecting any externality of things, and therefore founded his own philosophical sub-school of Madhyamaka, the Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamaka school, and therefore we can see that he was a great scholar in his own right. And you cannot just start a sub-school or a school of philosophy just like that. So, on the contrary, Master Bhavaviveka was a Savatantrika Madhyamaka follower and proponent, or the founder of the Sotantrika Savatantrika Madhyamaka. So within the Savatantrika Madhyamaka sub-school of the Middle Way, there are these two, the Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamaka, and then the Sutrantika Savatantrika Madhyamaka. So, amongst the Nalanda masters, there were, Master Chandarakshita was someone who was a great scholar in his own right, having founded this Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamaka sub-school. And in the 8th century, the Tibetan Emperor Chisong Detsen invited Shandarakshita to Tibet. Of course, the Buddhism had already come to Tibet before that. During the 7th century, during the time of King Songtsen Gampo, who actually married two princesses, one from China and the other one from Nepal. And so by marriage with these two princesses, the Buddhism also came to Tibet through them. But during the time of Chisong Detsen, the Tibetan emperor in the 8th century, he decided to invite Shandarakshita directly from India. And having come to Tibet, Master Shandarakshita actually tested the Tibetan boys whether they would be able to keep the monastic vows or not. And so the first 7 boys were ordained, and then so monastic ordination was started by him, and then he also gave teaching of Buddhism to the Tibetans, and he also instructed the Tibetans to translate the Sanskrit text, the Buddhist text, into Tibetan, because he said you have your own writing system, and therefore we have 13 volumes of Vinaya in translation into Tibetan, and then maybe 15 or 20 different scriptures or volumes on the Prajnaparamita Sutras and so forth. And so in all there are over 100 volumes of the words of the Buddha translated into Tibetan. And then with regard to the writings of Master Nagarjuna and also the Abhisamaya Lamkara by Maitreya and so forth, which are, in other words, the exegetical texts commenting on the words of the Buddha. So that we have the translations of these shastras in Tibetan, or which make up over 220 volumes. So I usually tell Tibetans these 300 volumes of Ganjur and Denjur are not just meant for worship to be placed on the altar, but we need to take them down and study them as textbooks. So Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, that's Tibetan Tibet, actually came directly from Nalanda. So today, regarding the writings of the Nalanda masters, the top scholars in Tibet, we have this as the tradition of memorizing the root text, as I said before, and then study the meaning word by word, and then also through rigorous logical debate by using the logic or epistemology of Nidinaka and Dharmakirti. So in the past, the Indian masters used to call Tibet a remote land without religion, but today Tibet has become a central part of the world in terms of the Dharma. And so Tibetans have actually our own legacy because of the device, the writing system that we have, and also because of the translation of over 300 volumes of Ganjur and Denjur, most of which were translated from Indian languages, but few, such as Sandhi Nimuchana Sutra and so forth, were translated from Chinese. So what the teaching or the explanation of Buddha Dharma that I'm giving is from this Nalanda tradition. So of course I have not studied well in my childhood. I actually like to play a lot, not focus on my study. But thanks to the kindness of my master, who actually sometimes showed stern face, and I was able to do some study. And then after coming into exile in India, I have read, I've been reading quite a lot of the scriptures from the Kanjur and Tenjur. So even today I read them, so whenever I have time. So of course I don't know much, but Master Chandrakshita, having established the pure Nalanda tradition through scripture and reasoning combined, I am able to give this kind of teaching to you. So having studied the text, then when you are, by applying the teaching in your practice, you should reach liberation and omniscience. And then there is this sutra which says that the sages do not wash away the sins of sentient beings. It's known as checking the source of this verse, which sutra it comes from. So sages do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they remove these sufferings of sentient beings with their hands, nor do they shift their own realization into others, but by teaching reality, they help beings to liberation. So having generated bodhicitta within himself and having engaged in the practice whereby he accumulated the wisdom and method, for over 3 countless eons, the Buddha, from his own experience, taught us, gave us his teaching. So he says, the sins of sentient beings cannot be washed away by the Buddhas or the sages. And then the effect of those sins is suffering, and these suffering cannot be, actually, the Buddha cannot be kind to us or pat us on, and through which they cannot remove these sufferings. So we sometimes seek blessings from others, which is actually, if you look closely, this is against the teaching of the Buddha. Asking, please give me this blessing, that blessing, or blow on my eye, and so forth. These are against the Buddha's words. And then sometimes some lamas might pretend to have some kind of a power, but if his blessings didn't work, then he or she may say that, oh, it's your karma now. If the blessings proved effective, then they might pretend that they had some power. So the Buddha said, his own realizations, such as the purification of negativities and his experience of the realizations, cannot be transposed into others. So how do the Buddhas help sentient beings? The next line says, by teaching reality, the Buddhas lead beings to liberation. And so he teaches the law of causality, which rejects any creator God, nor things, rejects also that things do not come from some kind of a primal factor, that things do not come without causes and conditions. And so I yesterday mentioned the 3 conditions: unwavering, impermanent, and potential conditions. So if your mind is disciplined, then you have happiness. Unruly mind brings about suffering. So as a means to discipline your mind, which is unruly, and to make your mind calm and pacified, you need to apply the teaching within yourselves. So no one wants suffering. The 7 billion people on this earth, no one, not a single one wants suffering. But we have suffering. Why? Because of ignorance. Nobody deliberately wants to cause themselves suffering. But they cause themselves suffering because of ignorance. So, of the 12 links of Tibetan origination, the first link the Buddha gives is ignorance. It cannot go away if you pray for it to go away. And since ignorance is a part of the mind, an aspect of mind, it will not go away through physical exercises as well. But what you need to know is what this ignorance is ignorant about, how it is ignorant about things. And in order to overcome it, you need to develop knowledge about the reality of which ignorance is ignorant. And therefore, by showing the reality, for example, we hold on to things which are impermanent as permanent, and something which is painful as being blissful, and something which is unclean as clean, and then that which has no self as having some selfhood. So with these distorted views, we cause ourselves troubles. So sometimes we get notion that, we know something. And if you look at the castles that were built in the ancient times, I mean, the kings must have thought that they would live forever, and so forth, but they have not. And so this is due to the grasping at permanence of themselves. And when the Berlin Wall was built, Olenka or somebody actually said it will remain for centuries and thousands of years and so forth. But the Berlin Wall actually fell. So we have this notion of impermanence in things which are impermanent. So when you engage in actual actions which are used to defeat others in order to have victory for oneself, you actually are causing more, creating causes for your own, more suffering for your own self. And then things that are unclean, impure, are held as if they are clean, such as our body and so forth, are held as clean, although it's full of putreds. And so many problems arise through this kind of distorted views. So, as I said yesterday, the root of all these troubles is holding on to what apparently looks to have some kind of a true existence. So, things do appear to us as if having some kind of a true existence, objective existence, and we actually grasp at that, and that causes us more suffering. As I said yesterday, even scientists are able to see this. And therefore, the Buddha taught us the true reality of things, and the teaching of the Buddha is therefore dependent or based on the two truths. So we'll go through the text on page 26, I think. I'll not give a reading transmission. I'll just pick up a few main points and then explain them. So in the beginning of all the texts that were translated into Tibetan from India, whether they are the words of the Buddha or the Shastras written by Indian masters, there is this title given in Sanskrit. In the language of India, Raja Parikatha Ratnamali. In Tibetan, Gyavoladam Chawarampucha Tenwa, which means the precious garland and epistle to the king. So any Buddhist text has this expression of worship in the beginning of salutation. And then the authors go through the main body of the text, and then at the end there's dedication. So homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I bow down to the omniscient, freed from all defects, adorned with all good qualities, the sole friend of all beings. So the Buddha is someone who is free of all faults and replete with all the good qualities, and who is compassionate to all sentient beings. The sole friend of all beings refers to that compassion. So Master Nagarjuna, when he praised the Buddha, he mainly praised from the point of view of the Buddha giving teaching of dependent origination. For example, in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he gives this, he salutes the Buddha for having taught dependent origination, which is free from the 8 extremes. So he praises the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, which is free from cessation, or without cessation, without arising, without annihilation, without permanence, and with coming and going, and distinction and identity. So everything that the Buddha teaches is said to be based on this dependent origination of things, And in the 60 stanzas of reasoning also, the Master Nagarjuna praises the Buddha and salutes the Buddha for teaching dependent origination as well. And so the Buddha gave teaching on the dependent origination from his own experience. So this has significance. Sometimes so maybe I am having a big mouth, as Alma says. This first verse in the Precious Garland could also be used to refer to the Christian God or the So we could use this verse and say, instead of saying I bow to the omniscient or the Buddha, I bow to the God. And also in Islamic tradition, we could use this to refer to Allah. So because Allah or God are said to be free from all kinds of any defect, and that they have compassion and so forth, this verse could be reference to, could be used to refer to them as well. But when it comes to when we refer to the teaching of dependent origination, it is only the Buddha who taught about dependent origination of things, and no other founding teachers. And then at the end of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the verse that I recited in the beginning says, in order to rid us of distorted views, the Buddha taught the sublime Dharma, and so the distorted views are something which must be eliminated from our mind stream, and so the Buddha taught dependent origination for that purpose, out of his compassion. And then, in the verse of salutation by Dignaga, in his Pramana Samuchaya, the Buddha is said to be to be someone who has become reliable, which means that the Buddha was not someone permanently, right from the beginning, enlightened, but became enlightened through causes and conditions. And what are the causes? First one is that of compassion, which thinks of others' well-being. And then he refers to the Buddha as Dhamma, or teacher, which means someone who teaches others from his experience. So this teacher refers to the realization or the experience or the knowledge of the Buddha. And then the Buddha also is referred by this term Sugata, which comprise of the elimination of negativities and the realization of all the things. And then the Buddha also is referred by Dignaga as the one who is the savior. By giving teaching from his own experience, he is able to save others or help others. And then on this particular verse of salutation found in Pramana Samuchaya is actually expanded in the Pramana Vartika by Dharmakirti, especially in the second chapter of Pramana Vartika. In the second chapter is the commentary on this verse, salutation verse from Pramana Samuchaya. And then in Tibet we had the tradition of revering to 6 or 8 in Nalanda masters who were called the 6 ornaments, and there's 2 sublime masters. The 6 ornaments were Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Asanga, Vajrabandhu, Dignaga, Dhammakirti, and then the 2 sublime masters, Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha. And so we had this tradition of revering, praying to them. But the classical texts that we study in the monastic institutions were also include texts written by the Buddha Palita, Chandrakirti, Buddha Bhaviveka, Chandarakshita, and so, others. So because we study the text written by Buddha Palita, for example, which has become actually the main source of Chandrakirti's writings. So Buddha Palita actually wrote his text, Buddha Palita, without, it's not very wordy, but it touches on the essential points very precisely. And then Bhaviveka wrote the lamp of wisdom, and his auto-commentary, the Nagarjuna, which is the Nagarjuna, or the Blades of Reasoning, which gives all the different philosophical traditions that existed in India at the time of Viveka himself. So when you read the text, you really find it amazing. So merely saying that things have no true existence or no intrinsic existence, what reasons others who argue against this give, and what the Madhyamakas who hold this philosophical assertion of things having no intrinsic existence answered them, and so forth. And so Bhaviveka's Madhyamaka Hridaya and its commentary, the Nagarjuna, Blades of Reasoning, must be studied. And then the Lamp of Wisdom by Master Bhaviveka also gives reasonings by which he objects Buddha Palita's commentary or interpretation of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and to answer that, Master Chandrakirti wrote the Prasana Pada to defend the position of Buddha Palita. And so I thought that it is, I was thinking of writing a praise to the 17 Nalanda masters. Mindu. Is it there? Mindul. Mindul. So the praise to the 17 Nalanda masters is not in this book. So sometimes I jokingly tell people that in the past people used to call Tibetan Buddhist tradition Lamaism, because lamas and the reincarnate jokos were famous in Tibetan society, whereas people who are really learned and scholar and very good practitioners remain very humble. For example, in the case of Zapetul Rinpoche, he was living like a traveler or a pilgrim. And then in Kham region of Tibet, people actually judge the greatness of the Lama by the number of horses and animals in the caravan. So this actually is because Tibetans were illiterate, and then they only run after names and and one Amdo Lama, Lama from Amdo, has said that the Indian masters have short name, but in terms of knowledge, their knowledge is actually long, whereas Tibetan lamas have long names with short knowledge. And so we have actually run after the names and titles of lamas, not really looking whether the lamas are qualified with the knowledge and experience of the teaching of the Buddha. And therefore, the Western travelers in Tibet actually gave this name, Lamaism, and then there were lamas who were actually seen as if they could do anything they like. And so the Tibetan Buddhist tradition got the name Lamaism. But if you actually look at how we study and practice, we study all the sutras and tantras, and then practice Vinaya, the Pratimoksha, as well as Bodhisattva Yana and the tantric practices. So the complete teaching is practiced through. And today, people have come to become aware that Tibetan Buddhist tradition actually is a pure Nalanda lineage or tradition. So in the past, we made distinction or divided ourselves as yellowhead sect or redhead sect or blackhead sect and so forth. So sometimes I jokingly tell people that maybe I should start a greenhead sect. So we have actually been quite, we have lacked in terms of, we have not been successful in the spread or the practice of the Dharma that much. And then the Lamas wear these robes given. So when the abbots were appointed, so they would come to see me. And many of these abbots were used to be old, elderly monks, and then they actually they had to actually take off this special robe when they made prostration to me, because it was proving very heavy for them. And then when they finished their prostration, they would have difficulty putting it on. So this is called, the robe that they wore was called kubher, some kind of a cloak. And then the Dalai Lama, me as the Dalai Lama in my childhood also used to wear brocade robes. So what's the use? So we should actually respect the robes that we have been given by the Buddha himself, the yellow robes. And so I used to have some shirt which actually stood very stiff on my shoulder, and we have deceived ourselves in a way, Tibetans. So of course there were people who were really practical and realistic in their approach to the Dharma. So I'm actually being a disgrace here, telling bad things about Tibetans, because it seems I'm the right person to point out these faults, the defects that we have. Because in the during the bi-monthly confession of the monastics, we asked this question: do you see the faults as faults, and would you restrain on yourself in the future? So on the kubher, which the cloaks of robe that the abbots wore, had also something, a flap, some kind of a patch, which actually is representing a layperson's clothes. So what's the use of for a monk wearing this kind of robe? So, in other words, now, whatever the case in the past may have been, Tibetan Buddhist tradition is in the pure Nalanda lineage. So we actually can feel proud of the tradition amongst ourselves as Buddhists, as well as amongst the people who are not Buddhists. So it's very important for us to be practical of what regarding the Dharma. And the next verse, O King, I will explain practices solely virtuous to generate in you the doctrine, for the practices will be established in a vessel of the excellent doctrine. So this is a verse which is said to be the promise to compose the text. And so the aim of the teaching is to attain a higher rebirth, but the main aim is to reach liberation. So in order to reach liberation, attain liberation, if we lack intelligence, we cannot think about selflessness. And therefore, we need to meditate on selflessness in order to attain liberation. And for that intelligence, to have that kind of intelligence, we need also a physical basis where this intelligence, where we could have the intelligence. And therefore, it is important to obtain a higher rebirth. And then, secondly, the teaching of the Buddha is for happiness, and which is twofold: temporary and the ultimate. And so the higher status or higher rebirth, with all the facilities, wealth, resources, as well as long life and health, good health, you can also, with these facilities, you can actually achieve the temporary goal of happiness as well as serve others. By understanding the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate truth, you'll be able to help others as well as yourself. And therefore, this human life, human intelligence is crucial. And then there are other features according to Tantra, such as having the 6 constituent factors and so forth in this human life. So by using our intelligence, we could create happiness for ourselves in this life, as well as gain a higher rebirth in the next life, and then help ourselves to reach enlightenment or liberation. In one who first practices high status, definite goodness arises. For having attained high status, one comes gradually to definite goodness. High status is considered to be happiness. So compared to animals, of course, in terms of numbers, animals are much greater in number than humans. But we have this mind with which we could have all kinds of thought processes going on in our mind, and we could actually be worse than animals. But if we could actually think constructively, we could also create a goodness for ourselves. Whereas we could also turn something that the animals may not be able to do, to turn, which is, the misfortune into fortune of positive factors for ourselves that we can do as humans. So high status is considered to be happiness. Definite goodness is liberation. So by understanding the workings of the Four Noble Truths, how we enter samsara and exit samsara, by understanding that, you reach liberation. The quintessence of these means is briefly faith and wisdom. So the temporary and the goal of higher status and the ultimate goal of liberation comes through our faith and wisdom. So in order to achieve higher rebirth, by creating positive karmas, we would be able to attain that. And by restraining ourselves or refraining from negative actions. So this seems to be something which is obscure to us. Although, generally speaking, we may be able to say, good experiences come from good causes and bad ones from bad causes. But in order to go in, when we go into the deeper workings of the karma, it becomes quite extremely hidden phenomena. Now, in order to understand the working of karma, we need to see the obvious things and then also use inference with regard to the slightly hidden phenomena. Due to having faith, one relies on the practices. So, by understanding the causes leading to higher rebirth and so forth, due to having wisdom, one truly knows. And so one uses one's intelligence to understand reality. Of these two, wisdom is the chief, faith is its prerequisite. So of these two, wisdom and faith, the principal means is wisdom. Our faith or compassion and so forth must be complemented by this wisdom. So the practice of morality, giving, patience, concentration, effort and so forth, when they are complemented by the wisdom of perfection of wisdom, then they are also called perfections. So whatever we do, it is the unique practice in Buddhism is to be complemented by wisdom or intelligence. So all the religious traditions, other traditions are very good in helping others with the single-pointed faith in the God, the Creator. So they could also actually use this prayer, you are the master, you are the deity, and so forth. So with single-pointed faith, the theistic religious practitioners can actually regard their God as such. Whereas since there's not much emphasis on wisdom, they do not have that practice based on this kind of wisdom. So one who does not neglect the practices through desire, hatred, fear, and bewilderment is known as one of faith, a superior vessel for defining goodness. So without knowing much reason, one is actually led by desire, hatred, fear, or bewilderment. And there is also the partiality, saying, oh, I belong to this religion and not that religion, and so forth. So proceeding with these four factors, desire, hatred, fear, and bewilderment, should not happen to us, but we must develop understanding by using our intelligence. So we'll have a break for 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Rest. And start some questions.
Like
yesterday, I would like to take some questions. Oh yeah, that's it.
To have the happiness or joyous state in the higher rebirth or even in the next rebirth, we need to avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions, 3 of the body, 3 of 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. So if you kill others, hurt others, such as by killing or stealing somebody's things or raping someone, or then committing the verbal non-virtuous actions of lying, idle gossip, So many of our talks, when we talk with people, we actually engage in idle talks, talking about movies, sex, and so forth, and also about war. And so these are idle gossip or senseless talk. And then divisive talk and so forth. And then there are the three of the mind, non-virtuous actions. Covetousness. If you actually think of having some others' possessions, you will not feel at ease. And then if you kill somebody, you'll feel uncomfortable, as well as stealing and raping somebody. Without touching a religion, even if you steal somebody's possessions, you will land in jail or be sued in a court, as well as raping. And so, even on the temporary or the immediate level, if you commit the 10 non-virtuous actions, you will suffer in this life. But avoiding killing, stealing, and also avoiding the non-virtuous actions of one's speech, such as telling lie and indulging in divisive talk and using harsh language, and also idle gossip will also be not good in the eyes of others as well. And covetousness, malicious thought, and wrong view also will have negative effect or consequence on you. And when you commit these negative actions, people will have a different attitude towards you, and you will also have no friends and remain lonely. So you cannot gain friends by committing or indulging in these 10 non-virtuous actions of killing and so forth, lying and so forth, and covetousness and so forth. So, if you want friends, committing the 10 non-virtuous actions will not bring friends to you. With regard to the wrong view, different religions can have different interpretations according to their own belief system. For example, in the Christianity or Christian, true genuine practitioners of Christianity or Islam and so forth would be sincere in their own practices, whereas with regard to the wrong view, the different religious practitioners may have different interpretations. So I always say that love and compassion, which are shared teachings of all the religious traditions, are causes, could be causes for higher rebirth. And then with regard to moksha or liberation, some non-Buddhist traditions of India, like Jainism, describe the liberation or moksha as a place which resembles an umbrella put upside down. Whereas in Buddhism, its liberation is freedom from the negative emotions, and the emptiness of the mind, which is free from the negative emotions, is considered liberation. So avoiding these non-virtuous actions has benefit in this life as well, and to have a good, to live a good life. On top of these 10 non-virtuous actions, you also avoid alcohol and wrong livelihood and harming others. And when you give gifts or alms to some beggars, you should not look down upon them, but give them with respect. and also venerate those worthy of veneration, such as parents and teachers and so forth. And so there are these 16 factors that are said to lead to higher rebirth. So whether you have taken some vow or not, this life itself, which is we have, is a higher rebirth. To live a good life in this life and also to have a good life in the next life, we need to practice these 16 factors. So day after tomorrow we'll have the tantric initiation, and as preliminary to that we'll do the upasaka, layperson's vows. So the day after tomorrow morning. And following the layperson's vows, we'll also do the ceremony for generating bodhicitta. So practice of Buddhism cannot just be doing physical practices like austerity. As it says in verse number 11, practice is not done by just mortifying the body, for one has not forsaken enduring others and is not helping others. So if you commit the 10 non-virtuous actions, they will have negative consequences here in this life as well as in the next lives. You'll have the ripening effects, and regarding which there are different effects. So those not esteeming the great path of excellent doctrine. So if you kill someone, taking their life, you will have a short life in the next rebirth. So you have, if you commit the 10 non-virtuous actions, you will consequently suffer. So as a result of killing the great killing or non-virtuous actions, the 10 non-virtuous actions, you are said to be reborn in hell realm, and then those with intermediate weight will lead you to animal realm and so forth. So as a result of the 10 non-virtuous actions, you will have a short life. And then the opposite of these 10 non-virtuous actions is avoiding or giving up, abandoning, killing, and so forth. So if you are honest and not try to deceive others, people will trust you. You cannot remain alone in living in a human society. So as a human being, you have to depend on others. And if you could be friendly with those whom you depend, it would be good. So while living in a human society, if you actually have to live alone, be lonely, you will not be happy at all. Thinking wherever you look, to the right or left and so forth, you would think that, oh, I cannot, this person does not trust me, that person does not trust me, and so forth. Whereas if you can actually have a feeling that, feel that this person trusts me, that person trusts me, then you'll be happy. So the delineation of bad or good karma is done on the basis of the motivation. So desire, hatred, and ignorance, the actions they generate are non-virtuous. Verse number 20. Non-desire, non-hatred, non-ignorance, and the actions they desire, they generate are virtues. And so here, the ignorance, maybe there are two kinds of ignorance. Ignorance, which is the deeper ignorance, that is the grasping at true existence of things. And then the other one is the ignorance about the law of causality. So with regard to the first type of ignorance, it has not to do with whether you create positive or negative karma. So as long as there is this kind of ignorance, you are bound in samsara because of creating even those of the meritorious karma which leads to higher rebirth, such as the higher planes of existence, the form realms and so forth. They are also brought about by this grasping at true existence as well. And so non-virtues come from non-virtues come all sufferings, and likewise all bad transmigrations, and from virtue all happy transmigrations and the pleasure of all lives. Verse number 22. Desisting from all non-virtues and always engaging in virtues with body, speech and mind. These are called the three forms of practice. So this shows the three types of actions, virtuous actions of body, speech and mind. So by training oneself in these, you will be freed from the lower realms of existence, hell realm, hungry ghost realm, animal, and reborn as human or God, one gains extensive happiness, fortune and dominion. And likewise, through the concentrations, which actually look at the higher concentrations of higher realms as peaceful, and then the states of mind in the lower realms as rough. So when you are attracted towards essential objects and have attachment, abandoning this kind of attachment to the essential objects, but placing your mind in total concentration and absorption, you'll reach the first concentration level, second, third, and so forth. And then with regard to the three realms of existence, how do we actually know or verify? One time His Holiness asked one Hindu Swamiji in Nasik, who was from Mathura, and when I asked him about what reason do you give for the existence of the three realms of existence, and he had no answer. So we have sensory perceptions which see things like physical sights, sounds and so forth, and have sensual pleasure. And so someone who actually renounces the sensual pleasure but actually goes into meditation on single-pointed concentration. So when someone is taking that kind of meditation as a primary object, which leads to up to maybe the third form ram, and then in the fourth form ram and above that, which the mind remains in equanimity, and then there are the four formless rams. So due to the difference in the power of the meditation, absorption in the concentration, the mind becomes subtler and subtler. So there could be such effects where in the meditators actually sees the pros and cons of the higher and lower realms of existence, that the higher realms are more peaceful and the lower ones are more coarse and so forth. So because of at the causal level they have different subtleties, degrees of subtlety, that in the resultant stage also in the form realms and the desire realm, then the form realm and so forth, there's also difference. And so the 16 different realms within the form realm also are the state of mind are subtler than those of the mind within the desire realm, which are kind of attracted towards the sensual objects. Whereas in this formless realm, the mind becomes still subtler. Although from the tantric point of view, we could still say that they have some form, but that is a very subtle form, which is in this, because of which in the Sutrayana they are said to be formless. So, because even at the time of Buddhahood, for someone who has reached the formless realm, they should be the subtlest wind energy, because even at the Buddha level, when they reach Buddha level, that wind energy still remains. So we cannot just use as reason such as, oh, these are possible because the scripture says so, but we could just think along these lines on the basis of the subtlety of the different states of mind. Through concentration, immeasurable formless, one experiences the place of Brahma and so forth. Thus, in brief, the practice of for higher status and their faults. The doctrines of definite goodness, 25, on page 29, are said by the conquerors to be deep, subtle, frightening. So as I mentioned yesterday, when the Buddha first became enlightened, he said, I found this nectar-like Dharma, which is profound, peaceful, and non-fabricated, clear light, and non-composed. So, when someone is obsessed with the theory of self, Atman, or soul, then if you teach them that there is no self, it could cause scare them. And so I once had a friend from Bihar, and he came to me, and then he also took ordination from me, monastic ordination, and at one time we were having conversation, and I talked about selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena and emptiness, and he actually literally, his whole body shook out of fear. So he said, if there is no self, then what actually is there? How can we talk about karma and past and future lives and so forth? And so this is what he felt. And therefore, one Tibetan scholar said, the object which is held by the view of the grasping at self is asserted by the non-Buddhists, whereas it is rejected by the Buddhists. So when someone holds this view of a self, an Atman or so, if they are told there's no self, they would say, oh, you are actually a nihilist. So things are without any self. To the childish who are not learned, this causes frightening. And it says, "I'm not, I will not be, I have not, I will not have." That frightens all the childish and extinguishes fear in the wise. So this ignorance about the true reality of things is overcome according to the 400 verses by Aryadeva. He says that it is overcome by this understanding of dependent origination. One who sees dependent origination will not have this grasping at self. So if you understand this dependent origination well, you will be able to do away with this grasping at self. And therefore, Master Aryadeva says, with all your efforts, you should develop this understanding of selflessness. So if you think along these lines of thinking about dependent origination, how things are dependent originated and so forth, then when you are told that things have no self, you'll be able to understand the real meaning of what that is about. And then you will also be able to see that this view of selflessness is like the weapon against to actually destroy the grasping at true existence. So that's why the text says, and this understanding of selflessness extinguishes fear in the wise. Verse number 26, end of that, on page 30. And then you'll be moved to tears as by him who speaks only of helping beings. It was said that all beings have arisen from the conception of I and are enveloped with the conception of mine. So when you feel renunciation of this samsara and you want to be free from it, you need to see that you need to overcome ignorance, and particularly the root of all ignorance is the grasping at true existence of things, for which the only antidote or counterforce is the wisdom realizing non-inherent existence in things. Merely meditating and cultivating compassion, love, and so forth, bodhicitta will not serve as a counterforce, direct counterforce to this ignorance. As it is said by Dharmakirti in Brahmanavartika, because love and so forth do not diametrically go against or are contrary to that of the grasping at itself. So love and compassion and so forth do not actually have this distorted view of reality which the ignorance has, and therefore in terms of their object of apprehension, the love and so forth cannot be the counter force to this ignorance. The I exist, the mind exists. These are wrong as ultimates, for the two are not established by a thorough consciousness of reality, just as it is. So we have a notion of an I, thinking of course, when we think about my body, my mind, and so forth, you have the sense of an I on the basis of these aggregates. Even in the animals have this, but the I does not exist the way it appears to you. And so the reality here refers to the ultimate reality. So with wisdom, what we do is analyze what the true existence, how things exist in reality. And what you find is that of selflessness, whereas things such as self, others, and so forth are accepted on the basis of convention and not doing any kind of analysis into them, their nature. As it is said, in the quantum physics, things do not have any objective existence. Even although the scientists look at the matter and not so much mind, but they still say that things or matter do not have any matter does not have any objective existence. So that can only be understood or found when you do analysis into the things, that things have no objective existence. So the reality here refers to the ultimate reality or ultimate truth, as referred in Madhyamaka Avatara as well. The mental and physical aggregates arise from the conceptual of I, which is false in fact. How could what is grown from false seed be true? So our body or the aggregates actually have come as a result of a grasping at some true existence of a self. But if you actually look at that self, you will not be able to find it, and therefore it has come from a false seed. As long as there is still grasping at the aggregates, you will not be able to eliminate grasping at a self. Just as it is said, or having thus seen the aggregates as untrue, the conception of I is abandoned, and due to abandoning of the conception of the I, the aggregates arise no more. So when you actually analyze the self and the aggregates and so forth, of course you do not find them, but they do exist by way of dependence. We can actually, on the basis of understanding dependence, we can think about cherishing others and overcoming self-cherishing attitude and so forth. So the I, or this person, actually is established merely by way of the appearance, merely as the appearance. So when you look at me, you'll say, I see the Dalai Lama. But if you ask, which is Dalai Lama? You see my body, and then from my speech, you will be able to kind of infer what the kind of thoughts are going on in my mind. And the body that you see of me and the mind that you infer are not me. You'll say they are the Dalai Lama's body and the mind. And then when I look at the elder in front of me from Thailand, I can say I see a Thai elder, a monk, but without being satisfied with what appears, the appearance there. If I try to look for the identity of the elder, I will not be able to find him either. And so, similarly, with regard to the Tathagata is not the aggregates, nor separate from it. Neither the Tathagata is in the aggregates, nor the aggregates in the Tathagata. And the Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What else is Tathagata? So similarly, we can do this kind of analysis into things. So without being contented with the appearance, if you actually search for the identity of that object, you will not find it. And therefore, what we can say is things do exist, but not by way of their own inherent existence, but by way of mere appearance, mere name and designation. So when you are able to develop this certainty that things have no true existence, and you will be able to see that this counters your grasping at self and true existence, and therefore to prove that things have no self or no true existence, there is lots of reasons to do that. Whereas if you try to prove that things have self or some things like that, and you won't have much reason. And so you can actually think of things, use reasonings such as refutation of production from things that exist or not exist, and on the base, which actually checks into the cause of things, and then the nature by using the reasoning called the lack of one and many and so forth. You will be able to. You should gain certainty into the fact that things have no self. Just as it is said then that an image of one's face is seen depending on a mirror, but does not really exist as a face. Of course, when we look in the mirror, your face, your reflection of your face will appear, and then accordingly your perception of that image. But that image which appears to the perception which sees it, and if you actually try to search for the image in that mirror, you will not be able to find anything that you can pinpoint as being your image. So the conception of I exists depending on the aggregates. So on the basis of the psychophysical aggregates, you will have a sense of an I. The person who has obtained these psychophysical aggregates, but like the image of one's face, the I does not at all really exist. So just as without depending on a mirror, the image of one's face is not seen, so too the conception of I does not exist without depending on the aggregates. So on the basis of the aggregates, you have a sense of an I, just like the mirror image in the mirror. When the superior Ananda heard what this means, he attained the eye of doctrine and repeatedly spoke of it to monastics. So as long as you have grasping at the aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates, you will have the sense of the grasping at a self, and because of that you will have inappropriate thinking, and that in turn causes you to create negative emotions and karma, and that in turn gives rise to birth. So with these pathways, mutually causing each other without beginning, middle, and end, this wheel of cycling existence turns like the wheel of a firebrand. So ignorance creates the karma, formative karma, which leaves its imprint on the consciousness, and when those the imprints of the karma are activated by the craving and appropriation, then it becomes that of a potential existence, and then you take rebirth and you go through the other links, like those of the name and form and so forth. And then while you are actually within this one process of the chain of the 12 links of dependent origination, you would be actually creating another chain of this 12 links of dependent origination, chains of these 12 links of dependent origination, and these will in turn bring about your future lives. which are the samsaric, impure rebirths. So before being able to actually complete one cycle of the 12 links, you are creating numerous, other cycles of these 12 links. So it is said that the 12 links of dependent origination and so with regard to the 12 links of existence, it is said that at the most it takes 3 lives to complete the cycle. The first in the first life, you will go through the ignorance, karma, and consciousness, and then the second, those of the craving, appropriation, and potential becoming, and then the rest in the third life. So this wheel of cyclic existence turns like the wheel of the firebrand, because this wheel is not obtained from self, other, or from both. In the past, present, or future, the conception of I is overcome, and thereby action and rebirth. So this is with regard to doing some analysis into this. One who sees how cause and effect are produced and destroyed does not regard the world as really existent or really non-existent. So one who has heard, thus, the doctrine extinguishing all suffering. So with regard to emptiness, in the 24th chapter of Madhyamaka Karika, the realists, Buddhist realists have actually argued that the Madhyamakas who reject any objective existence even in convention are nihilists. And because of that, they are not able to assert the causality, and then the 4 truths, and then the 3 jewels, and so forth. Whereas Master Nagarjuna actually answers them, saying that I do not mean when I say that what you are actually objecting to me is not. It's because of not understanding the nature and the nature of this emptiness. In Buddha Palita commentary of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Buddha Palita says that if things were to have any intrinsic essential existence, then why the need for dependence? For example, in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, it says, in dependence because of something short, you have something tall. And so, in dependence, in relation to something that is short, you can talk about something that is long or tall. And also with regard to good and bad. And then, without action, there is no doer of the action. Until the action is not completed, you are not the doer as such. Whereas when the doer is, when the action is completed, the doer is no more. And so you have to actually understand that they are all relative. The action, the agent, and the acted upon object are relative. So if things were to have any intrinsic or inherent existence, Master Nagarjuna says that you who actually assert that things have inherent existence, actually you are tantamount to say that things have no causes. So Master Nagarjuna says that, uses this absurd consequence towards the realists, and therefore why the need for dependent origination if things were to have any inherent existence. We cannot actually have anything that we can talk about or point at without depending on others, other factors. So one who has heard this, the doctrine of extinction of all suffering, but does not examine it and fears the fearless state that trembles due to ignorance. So if Nirvana, verse number 42a, b, and so forth, if Nirvana is not non-thing, just how could it have thingness? The extinction of the misconception of things and non-things is called Nirvana. So here, with regard to the arahats who are said to be arahats with residue and without residue, so nirvana with residue so the Madhyamakas do not deny the existence of things, but they say that things have no inherent or absolute existence. And the things do exist by way of dependence and not by their own essential identity. Therefore, they are free from the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism, and therefore they hold the view of the middle way. In brief, so I've explained the others. No. Skipped all these. So his Holiness just read the lines which mentioned the biggest. There is short. We can talk about tallness of things. So that was the final dedication.